Hello everyone, welcome back to Như Ý channel. Xin chào các bạn đã quay lại với kênh của Như Ý. Hôm nay mình tiếp tục đọc câu chuyện Black Beauty. Mình đã xong vài chương rồi, bây giờ mình đến chương tiếp theo nhé. We already finished some chapter. Now we continue another one. Chapter 9. Chapter có nghĩa là chương. Ruined. While Mr. York was in London, a man called Reuben Smith was left in charge of the stables. He was clever and he was an excellent with horses. The only trouble was he had a drink problem. One day, Reuben brought me into town. He left me at the White Lion Inn, telling the ostler to have me ready at 4 sharp for the ride home. 4 o'clock came and went, but there was no sign of Reuben. I waited patiently, and it was 9 o'clock before Reuben finally came to collect me. I could tell at once that something was wrong. Instead of the polite, gentle person I knew, Reuben was loud and pushy. It was clear that he had been drinking. Did you know that your horse had a loose shoe? Asked the ostler politely. Tough. It can wait till we get home, snapped Reuben, letting me out of the stable. Reuben rode like a mad thing, whipping me to make me go faster even though I was galloping flat out. My shoe grew looser and more uncomfortable, and I wished I could stop. Then suddenly my shoe fell up. Reuben didn't notice and forced me on over the stones. They split my poor hoof, and it was so sore. Bravely, I kept galloping in spite of the terrible pain. But I couldn't keep it up, and suddenly I stumbled and fell on my knees. Reuben flew to the ground. He landed heavily, groaned once, and then fell silent. I felt like groaning too, but I managed to struggle up. My knees were in agony, and I wished that Reuben would get up and take me home. He didn't. It wasn't until around midnight that help finally came. I was so glad to hear a voice I knew coming from close by. Ginger! I whinnied as my old friend came along, pulling the dog cart. His knee got hurt. It's bleeding. The 2 men were riding in the cart, and they were very glad to see me. Thank goodness, we found them, said one, jumping down and running over. Oh no, exclaimed the other. Reuben's dead. The horse must have thrown him. How terrible! I was angry and upset that I'd been blamed for Reuben's death, but it wasn't my fault. I was suffering too. My knees were burning and I could hardly stand up. It was a horrible walk home, and I'll never forget it. Poor Reuben lay in the cart, cold as stone, while I painfully hobbled behind. Back at the stable, my knees were cleaned and a hot poultice put on my foot to draw the heat out of it. I was in agony, but at least the treatment helped. I also helped when everyone realized that Reuben had been drunk, and the accident was his fault, not mine. The next day, the farrier came to treat my knees and leg. The pain went on for many days, but once I started to get better, I was put out to graze in a small meadow. It was good to have my freedom again, although I missed the company of other horses, especially my dear friend Ginger. So imagine my excitement when one day Ginger was led into the field. Sadly, she was not there for a holiday. Lord George had ridden her too hard and ruined her health. Poor Ginger, she was never the same again and suffered terribly with her back and breathing. Look at us, she said sadly. 2 young horses, both ruined by our owners. Life is cruel. A few days later, life got even worse. Lord W. and Mr. York came to see me. "The black horse has to go," says Lord W. "I don't want a horse with scarred knees. He looks awful." Mr. York knew a man who kept a livery stable in Bath, who said he would buy me. "Black Oyster will be well treated there," he said. And so it was. A week later, I was on my way to Bath, and it all happened so suddenly that I didn't even have time to say goodbye to my dear friend Ginger. One more chapter, okay? Thêm một chương nữa nha. Chapter 10. A London Cab Horse. My new home was nowhere near as nice as a shawl. I was kept in a stall with a sloping floor that made my legs ache. I was also tied up and couldn't move around. The new work was dreadful. I was now a job horse, and this meant I was hired out to anyone who wanted me. It was not a happy time in my life. I was used to working for people who knew how to ride and drive a horse correctly. Now most of the people who hired me out neither knew nor cared. My mouth was yanked around and strain put on my back and legs. I was very unhappy, but I always did my best, and one day I was rewarded. A man hired me to take him on a long journey. It was a pleasure to work for this man. He did not jab or pull it on my mouth, and he talked to me kindly. The man hired me several times after that journey before buying me for a friend who wanted a good, safe horse. The friend was a kind man, but unfortunately he knew nothing about horses. He ordered the best food for me, but didn't think to check up on the groom he was paying to care for me. The groom was a thief, and instead of feeding the food to me, he was stealing it for his chickens and rabbits. It was a while before my owner found out, and by then I had become ill from lack of good food. My owner hired a new groom, but this man was no good either. He was lazy and vain. So my stable was dirty and smelled like a sewer. Then I got an infection in my feet. It was so painful, and it made me lame. My owner was very angry that he had been cheated for a second time. He decided not to keep a horse anymore, and once my feet were better, I was sold once again. I was taken to a horse fair, and it would have been fun had my future not depended on it. There was plenty to see as the fair was packed with every kind of horse, from tiny ponies to huge shires. Some animals were fit and healthy, while others were old or ruined by hard work. It was very noisy, and people rushed here and there, bargaining for a good deal. My broken knees put many people off buying me. Those that were interested prodded and poked me and looked at my teeth. Then a small, cheerful man with a soft voice came to see me. I liked him at once. He was not like the other people. He handed me hat gently, and I was very pleased when he bought me. My new owner called me Jack. He was a cabby called Jerry Barker. He lived in London with his white pony, their two children, Dolly and Harry, and a grand old horse called Captain. The Barkers didn't have much money, but I was very well cared for. On my first morning in my new home, Polly and Dolly fed me sliced apple and made such a fuss at me that I remember those happy times when I'd been Black Beauty. Straight away, I was put to work pulling Jerry's taxi cab. Jerry was a kind driver and he treated me well. But that first week was very hard. I wasn't used to the noise and bustle of the London street, and I felt nervous and anxious. But as I learned to trust Jerry, my job became much easier. I worked hard for him, and the work was hard. The cab. Each night, Captain and I were stabled in an old-fashioned box with a sloping floor. Jerry never tied us. The stable was clean and the food was good, so we were quite comfortable. Best of all, though, were the Sundays. These were our rest day. Then I did nothing but talk to Captain. He had been a war horse fighting in the Crimean War. And had shaken tale to tell. War sounds awful. Why were the men fighting? I asked him. I am only a horse, said Captain. But I know this. It must have been over something terrible if it was right to kill so many men for it. The end. See you in the next chapter. Thank you for listening.